In my review of the Polyend Play, I talk about how it's a really interesting Groovebox, it's very unique, it does a lot of things right, but I also talk about the fact that there's a lot of room for improvement, there was bugs that needed to be fixed, and more importantly, some features that I just felt that we were missing. And one of my key complaints about the Polyend Play is the fact that we only have stereo out, and there's no audio over USB, and there was no export feature. So there was no quick and easy way to take your stems out of the Polyend Play into your computer for final mixing, for example. And yeah, that kind of sucked. But today we're getting a major update for the Polyend Play, and one of the things that they have added is the ability to do exports on it. So with this new firmware, you can now export not only a stereo master, but also stems. So in today's video, we're going to do three things. Firstly, we're going to take a look at the update. Secondly, I'm going to make some music with the Polyend Play and some of the new samples that you get with it. And number three, I'm going to do something that I don't usually do. I'm going to do a track walkthrough. So I've exported a track that I made on the Polyend Play, and I mixed it in my DAW. I'm just going to take you through the process. Nothing fancy, but I thought it might be fun for you to see my process taking a song that I made on the Polyend Play and then mixing it. So we're going to do that last in today's video. And if you want to jump around to a specific part, there are timestamps. So let's get into it. With the new update, you can export either a single pattern or a chain of patterns. So you go into the menu, go to File, go to Export, and here you can see export current pattern, pattern stems, chain master, or current chain stems. So basically you either export a stereo master or the Polyend Play's 8 tracks plus the reverb and delay as stereo tracks. And once the exports are done, they do take a little while. You can just take your SD card, put it in a computer, and you can see that we now get individual folders per pattern that we've exported, and each of these folders contains the individual tracks, as well as 2 files, one for the reverb send and one for the delay send. Also important to note when we're talking exporting is that it exports in 44.1 kHz, and there's no way to change that on the Polyend Play as of now. And like you saw in the menu, you can export chains. So here we have a chain. So let's go in here to File, Export, Current, Chain Master, Chain Stems. Let's do Chain Stems. And let's export. And this will likely take a little while because we have the 4 patterns here. It has to go through all of it. So yeah, but it works very well so far, at least in my experience. Haven't had any big issues with exporting stuff. Really, really happy that they included this in the update. The new firmware also includes a bunch of bug fixes and improvements to the workflow. With the new update, there is also new sample packs. And if I'm not totally mistaken, I think the 2 new packs are the house pack. Got a bunch of samples, and there is also a tech house pack. And if we go to fill and beat, there are also some new fills that you can use to generate patterns. I have not done a lot of tech house, but I thought I'd just show you some of the samples and try and make some music. Got some nice bass samples. Let's create a fill for the hi-hats. Let's do an open hi-hat. Do 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 do. Got some mad effects. So that's nice. Let's add some reverb, delay, and let's turn down the volume a bit. Got a bunch of percussive sounds. These are kind of nice, like these vocal samples here. Let's put down some random percussion. And let's go sampling folder. Okay, that's kind of cool. Got stabs. And then we can create a little chord progression. I think we need a snare somewhere. Let's see here. Maybe a crash. And here's the good thing about the play. You can place it anywhere. So I'm gonna place it here. And I'm gonna make sure it only plays once in a while. So let's see here. Play 1, skip 3. And we can add some reverb to it and turn down the level. Kind of neat. Let's see, can we add something more? We're already pushing it a bit in terms of the available tracks here. Let's see if we can find a synth sample. Let's pitch them up and go here and pitch them up. So I don't know if this qualifies as tech house, but I think it sounds pretty cool. Okay, yeah, the sample sounds pretty good actually. I quite like them. So I've loaded a new house pack and I'm gonna see if I can make a house beat. Gotta find a bass. Something like that. And here we go. And in this pack we have a lot of different keys. And different synth sounds. So we have this little synth here. I used the Pong repeat type, 4 hits, 1 step, and this is what it sounds like. And we need some hi-hats. And we can use the fill. Let's go for something house. Okay, something like that. kind of fun. And another update is that we can go to the menu to samples and use delete unused samples if we want to purge the project that we're working on. So basically deleting all the samples that we're not using. So for example, here I have this tech house beat that I made, and if I just press it, it will delete samples from the project that I don't have active in the project. So in the kick folder, there's now just one kick. In perks, there's a couple of perks because I had multiple ones here. In stabs, there's just one stab. Before it was plenty of stabs. Same with claps, only one clap. So I've deleted all the samples that I weren't using. So it's a good way to save up on some storage because of course the project can't hold infinite amount of samples. This update also improves the way that you can record into the Polyend Play using the keyboard, for example, but there's still one super annoying thing that I think that they need to fix. If you want to use one sample and play a chord, you select 3 tracks. The problem is, if I press play, and sorry for no audio, this was kind of last minute, and if I now play the chord that I want, it will still be monophonic even though I have 3 tracks selected. But if I press live record, play, now it's polyphonic. So that's just something I want to see changed, the ability to actually jam polyphonically on top of a beat without having live record enabled. While I think that a lot of you will be happy with this update, and I think it's a step in the absolute right direction, there's one thing that I'm still really missing, one thing that would really tie it all together, and that is some way of recording your performance effects into the pattern so that you can then export the pattern, the stems, with those performance effects added. And I think this is so important because the strength of the Polyend Play is the immediacy with which you can just create a quick 16-step pattern, for example, and then use performance effects to vary it. But there's no way to get that performance out of the Polyend Play except as a stereo track through the mains outputs. It would really tie the jamming aspect together with its... I think that Polyend has a great opportunity here because, as most of us DAWless jammers know, the difficult thing is always taking your performances and creating a full track out of them, and combining the ability to just jam and have fun and create something on the fly with the ability to actually export that as stems with that performance included. That would be really cool. So that was the new firmware for the Polyend Play. Let me know in the comments what you think about the firmware. Was this the stuff that you wanted? Are there other improvements you want Polyend to make? I'm pretty sure that they will be reading the comments. I am obviously very happy with the new firmware because this was the main thing that I wanted for the Polyend Play to make it more usable for me personally. I have a bunch of songs I've made on the device that I can now export. Next up in the video, I want to show you how I took a track that I started on the Polyend Play, imported it into Cubase, and finished the mix. So here's a track walkthrough. Something that a lot of my viewers have been asking for are more track walkthroughs showing you the completed songs that I'm working on. And frankly, I'm not terribly good at doing that. I think for 2 reasons. Firstly, I don't feel particularly good about my own music. It's not something I'm super focused on trying to make it as an artist. And secondly, I don't feel particularly knowledgeable about mixing and mastering. So, take this for what it is. A simple walkthrough of a song that I made using the Polyend Play almost exclusively. As you can see here, all the tracks are Polyend Play except for these tracks down here. We got some strings, we got a bit of choir, those are native instruments, augmented voices, and augmented strings. But before I walk you through the finished mix and we have a listen to it, let me just wind back the clock. The first thing I did was, of course, to import the stems, and they needed to be converted because the Play exports in 44.1 kilohertz, 24-bit, and I use 48 kilohertz for most of my songs. The first thing I do in my DAW is basically just take the stems and arrange them in some way that kind of makes sense, just getting a feel for the track. The next step in the process is just mixing stuff, so basically adding effects, using EQ, sidechaining, compression, adding some tube distortion and stuff like that. I also use the new Moog effects quite a lot. They're based on their classic pedals. I think they sound really good. I like the interface, so I can definitely recommend them. And yeah, I also color code the different tracks so I know what track I'm working on based on the color. Lastly, I use the Cubase Arranger function to create different parts of the song, and when I felt ready, there's this really nice feature in Cubase that lets you take an arrangement and create either like a new arrangement inside your current project or just creating a new project with that arrangement. So let's have a little listen. here's the kick drum. You can see here that I've cut some of the lower frequencies, a little boost here around 72 kilohertz, and then just a bit of boost for the higher frequencies. And I'm also sending it to a bunch of other tracks using it as a sidechain source. So for example, if we take a look here, we have two effects channels, the short reverb, which is the intensity reverb from Arturia, and it's set to a medium reverb time. And then we have what I call the big space effects send. This is multiple effects. We have Raum from Native Instruments, we have the kilohertz pitch shifter, we have the eternity delay from Arturia. I'm using a downsampled Horizon preset, and I just turned down the cutoff a bit, the resonance, resolution, downsampling here, doing some bandpass filtering of the delay, and then there's a compressor on the end just kind of tightening it up. And this effect is actually being sidechained. So if we look here at the channel strip, we have the default compressor enabled with sidechaining on, and we can have a listen. So let me bring in the kick. So you can hear how the effects are like moving in and out a bit because they're being side chained. I'm also sending the percussions to their own group track, and I'm using the kick here to side chain it a bit as well. So you can see it's only a slight side chaining that's going on there, just a bit. If I increase it, just a bit. And next up is the chorus, and here I thought it would be fun just to take the original audio from the Polyend Play and then play the rough mix that I've made so far in Cubase. See here, I've actually cut this flute sample because I didn't quite manage on the Polyend Play to get every note where I wanted it to be. So when I exported it, I just cut it up a bit, moved it a little bit to get it just right. And next up comes my favorite part in this song. I think it has a nice vibe. I've also added some choir, added some arpeggiated strings, and it sounds pretty cool. Particularly like about this segment here is how these strings here and I really like how the arpeggiated strings gel together with the parts from the Polyend Play, especially the flute here. So these flute bleeps, it's an arpeggio. I'm using the flute sound. It sounds very synthy, but I'm using the flute sample from the main melody from the chorus, and I'm using that to just create this very hectic kind of sound. And I think it works really well. So I brought in the strings here just a little bit. To make it sound more hectic, more, I don't know, like something is about to happen, to build up a little bit of tension in this track. And then there's a last bridge before we go into the chorus again. already showed you the effects sends. So those are not the ones from the Polyend Play, by the way. Those are of course tracks, effects tracks inside of Cubase. And we also have the delay and the reverb here from the Polyend Play. But I just felt that it wasn't enough and I wanted to add something more to it. And if we take a look at the flute here, you can see that I'm using one of those new Moog effects. I really like it, a phaser. And I got some compressor and I got an EQ here. I am cutting a lot of the lows because the flute just doesn't have a lot of interesting harmonics down here. There was some weird resonances going on here around 1 kilohertz, so I cut that as well. I might go back and do an even finer EQ and cut some more of the resonances. I'm not entirely finished with the mix, but I wanted to get this video out. The big space reverb is interesting, and let's just have a little extra look at it again. For example, there's this pitch shifter here, and I'm basically just pitching it up 1 octave, about 20% on the mix, but it just adds a nice flutter to the sound. And I think those things are especially important when mixing stuff from the Polyend Play, because even though these look like stereo tracks, they're not actually real stereo tracks. The samples are originally mono, so the difference you're seeing here is just in level, how panned something is. So it's not really an original stereo sample that we're using, so of course it will lack the depth, the width rather, of a stereo sample. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're mixing stuff from the Polyend Play. So I think that's about it. That's my little song that I made with the Polyend Play, and yeah, hope you enjoyed the walkthrough.